So choline it's such a super nutrient. We talked about the importance of it in pregnancy for baby's brain development, but it basically acts like a neurotransmitter. So it's critical to brain function. It's critical to so many processes in the body. But one of the main benefits is really brain function and hormone kind of regulation as we age. So it is one of the most important nutrients that women all throughout their lifespan should be focused on getting enough of. And then think about, it wasn't that long ago that we demonized egg yolks. Everyone was eating egg whites. And choline is also found abundantly in foods like liver, animal liver, that many of us are not consuming very much of these days. It's also found in lesser amounts in some seafood and some grass-fed beef, but the most kind of abundant sources of choline in food form are eggs and liver.
All right. Well, it's a real pleasure to have Julie Sawaya on the show today. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
I'm really excited about this conversation. You know so much about nutrition and supplements, and I want to dive deep into the world of those things. And when I was looking into you and your story, I was so surprised because you were already so into nutrition and eating intentionally and doing all the right things. And then you tested yourself. And anyone who's in this biohacking world, we love to test, measure, and assess. And when you tested, you found out you were nutrient deficient. So that's a real shocker. How is that even possible? And tell us what that moment felt like and what you did about it.
Yeah, well, I would say that it really was the aha moment that led to Needed. My co-founder, Ryan, and I met in business school at Stanford. We were the uber nutrition nerds among our classmates, the ones that were shopping at the farmer's market and super intentional, preparing our own food, not eating the cafeteria food that everyone else was eating. And so when we tested our nutrient levels and found we were deficient, and I'm not just talking in one or two nutrients, like the entire panel was in the red zone. It was color coded and it was such a shock and honestly so overwhelming. I felt like, where do you even start when you have this many deficiencies, and how can that be possible that I have these deficiencies and Ryan has these deficiencies when we're trained nutritionists and we are so focused on food? And what we ended up finding is that this is a ubiquitous problem. It's not often talked about, but when you dive into the clinical literature, and now with AI, anyone can look this up, but at the time it was like a deep dive on PubMed of going deep on the clinical research, we found that across multiple nutrients, the statistics of nutrient deficiency among US women are in the 90% range. So 90+% of women are deficient in vitamin D and choline and omega-3, and the list goes on. And that what we found in our own testing was just mirroring this public health issue that nobody was talking about, despite there being a huge market for vitamins and supplements. It's a booming industry, and yet how could this many women be nutritionally depleted?
Wait a second. And this is what sorry to interrupt, but I feel like you tested, and on top of it, I'm guessing, because in the US I understand, and this is global as well, the ranges are not optimal ranges. The range is quite wide, and in fact, they're just normal ranges, and normal is the average of the population. And if the average population, average person, American, is sick, well, then we're in the sick range. And that just what kind of blows me away is that you as a nutritionist being doing all the right things, how that even got there. And you're saying 95% of the people, which I'd almost, believe, but you in your case, in your partner's case, why were they not even in this normal ranges?
Yeah, I think that's such a great point, that oftentimes when you get blood work done, you'll find your results and you might be at the low end of the normal range as it shows up on a LabCorp or a Quest result. But most functional practitioners, most practitioners that are really focused on optimal health and well-being aren't looking at the low end of the normal range. They're looking for you to be at the high end of the normal range, because the normal range is basically a minimum. It's not optimal. And so the fact that we were deficient even in this bare minimum kind of paradigm and the fact that so many women are, that is what I think is so concerning.
Did you have any illnesses, or were you sick during the time?
No,
you didn't have any gut problems. Like nothing you were normal.
Nothing that I knew, nothing that I was aware of. I think looking back, I did get sick more often. I was traveling a bunch, and I remember in my 20s, just about every time I got on a plane, it seemed like I would catch a cold, or I was tired, but I was also working a lot. I was in school. I was living a full life. But no, it was I think that as women, we've kind of been conditioned to believe that it's normal to feel tired. It's normal to be stressed and to be like the signs of depletion, which are real, have just been normalized. But just because it's common doesn't mean it's normal to feel the way that I felt or the way that so many women feel day to day.
You're right. You're right. We do normalize these things, or we find excuses. Oh, I just had a baby.
Yeah.
I've got a really big job now. Oh, I'm aging. Oh, it's menopause. Like there's so many things, and we just look for things to normalize. And I think that's part of the problem is we're just accepting this.
Yeah, and I don't think this is women's fault. I think it's like a societal problem. It really starts with the fact the place that Needed as a company started and where our journey went next once discovering this problem was lasering in on the life stage of fertility, pregnancy, and postpartum because it's the most nutritionally demanding time in a woman's life. It was also the life stage that Ryan and I were in coming out of business school. We were both married, thinking about starting our families. And what was shocking to us about that stage of life is that those nutrient deficiencies, 95% of women, remain deficient despite taking prenatal vitamins. 97% of pregnant women take a prenatal, and yet 95% are left depleted. So clearly, there was a problem with the solutions. The problem was not women being compliant. The problem was really, how are these products being designed? And most prenatals in the US are designed around what's known as an RDA. It's basically a nutritional bare minimum. The concept of an RDA, which is like a recommended daily allowance, came out of 1941, a wartime, when it was a really novel invention at the time, this concept of how do we up the nutrient sufficiency of a population heading into war, viewed as basically like our health is a national security interest. But the paradigm was really grounded in how do we avoid a disease in the general population, not how do we optimize health, not how do we orient around the specific diseases that impact women, or in the case of perinatal, fertility, pregnancy, and postpartum, the diseases that most impact pregnant women, like gestational diabetes or hypertension. We now know from the research that a lot of the pregnancy-related outcomes actually translate into lifelong health for women. So if you were pregnant 20 years ago, how you went through pregnancy can actually impact your health today, which is wild. But none of that was contemplated when the RDAs were set. And they have been updated over time, but not substantially. Fundamentally, they're still grounded in this concept of a nutritional bare minimum. And
That makes sense.
The problem really, like where the rubber meets the road, is that these national nutrition standards are guiding vitamin formulation, and they're guiding doctors' recommendations, and much more outside of that in the public policy sphere. But you take a vitamin, you think it's meeting your needs, you think it's filling in the gaps of your diet. It's like an insurance policy, but it's not. And what we know from the research and clinical experience is that most women aren't getting anywhere close to optimal ranges through the combination of taking supplements and through their diet. And it's really a lifelong women's health problem. And it's really why Needed exists, is to raise awareness for this problem of nutritional depletion and to be part of the solution to fixing it.
Actually, and it's so important during a time of pregnancy when you are building another human being. So that's why we take these prenatal supplements. And here you are saying that they really weren't doing much anyways. It's incredible that it's still alive.
I think... Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Maybe things would be much better in terms of our health and our trajectory if we did have the nutrients we needed.
Yeah, and I think most women are told that the prenatal is for the baby. And of course it is. Of course, you want to ensure the health of the growing fetus. That's a top priority. But our bodies are also pretty good at contributing the nutrition that our babies need. Healthy babies are born all the time in times of famine, in times of war, like in very suboptimal conditions, healthy babies can still be born. And that's because our bodies prioritize the baby's needs. But the consequence of that is many women start out pregnancy already nutritionally depleted, as Ryan and I were in that state. Decades of being on hormonal birth control can deplete the body of important nutrients. Those synthetic hormones can be taxing on the liver and other bodily processes and raise your baseline nutrient requirements. So if women don't know that and they don't know to fix their kind of nutritional status before pregnancy, then they go through the 9 months of pregnancy, which is so taxing. Your blood volume doubles. It's just such a metabolically, nutritionally intense time, and then giving birth. And then breastfeeding for many women who choose to or are able to breastfeed, that is also very taxing on the body. So the cumulative effect of this is if you're only giving your body kind of a bare minimum amount of nutrition throughout that time period as needs are dramatically increasing, women are often left nutritionally depleted at the end of the day, even if the baby is perfectly healthy and the birth was a success. And the outcome often is that mom is left depleted. And to give a couple of examples of this, your body literally takes calcium from your bones and teeth to give to the baby's forming skeletal system in utero. The baby's brain needs so much omega-3 and choline for development. And there's research showing that actually the maternal reserves of choline and omega-3 in the brain are depleted through that process. And there's some research showing that actually women's brains never fully recover from that if they're not supplementing in a really serious way, because many women don't know how important it is to consume high dosages of these nutrients. And then we move into, and I think this is something that we're really passionate about, is helping women understand the connection, because this isn't being talked about widely, that how you move through this life stage of fertility, pregnancy, and postpartum is directly connected to how you move through the next several decades of your health as a woman. So through the stages of women's health in your late 30s, in your 40s, perimenopause, which by the way is the second most nutritionally demanding time in a woman's life as hormones are shifting and changing. This is a critical time period in a woman's life, and I think I'm so grateful that there are so many, that it's becoming talked about now, that women are increasingly aware that menopause is, we think of menopause as kind of like a before and the after, but there's actually this 10 up to 15-year time period in a woman's life before the clinical definition of menopause, which is 12 months without a period. That is just so important for setting a health foundation for women's health thereafter.
You mentioned, that when you are growing a baby, your body does adapt and pulls what it needs. It pulls the calcium from your bones. It gives the developing brain things that from us. And you think about, wow, many of us have had children and on top of it have been on birth control. Probably that's been depleting us. And by the time we get to perimenopause, menopause, and we lose our hormones, we're thinking, okay, already without estrogen, we're more at risk with osteoporosis, but yet we've probably been depleted since we've had babies.
Or before then, or even before then, which is wild. And I think one of the natural next questions is, how would I know that? Or does it even matter if my levels are lower? Like maybe you don't feel like you're depleted, but when you think about the kind of unpack what are some of the signs of depletion, they tend to be very common symptoms in women: sleep disturbances, brittle nails, hair, lack of energy, immune function, brain fog. Some of that is a normal physiological process, like postpartum, the brain rewires to orient to the baby's needs. Some of the brain changes in perimenopause are a normal physiological change, but the symptoms of it can be exacerbated by underlying nutritional deficiencies. And there is emerging research to speak to the decline in estrogen. There is research showing now that as estrogen declines, nutrient needs increase. So nutrients like choline become so critical. And many women, the requirements as estrogen declines, it's like upwards of 450 milligrams of choline that's needed per day. That's like 3 eggs a day. And most women aren't consuming that much choline from their diet. And most women's supplements that are focused on a population in their 40s or 50s are dosing at almost nothing, like a trivial amount less than you'd get in 1 egg. So it's very common to be deficient in those nutrients as we age.
What does choline do?
So choline it's such a super nutrient. We talked about the importance of it in pregnancy for baby's brain development, but it basically acts like a neurotransmitter. So it's critical to brain function. It's critical to so many processes in the body. But one of the main benefits is really brain function and hormone kind of regulation as we age. So it is one of the most important nutrients that women all throughout their lifespan should be focused on getting enough of. And then think about, it wasn't that long ago that we demonized egg yolks. Everyone was eating egg whites. And choline is also found abundantly in foods like liver, animal liver, that many of us are not consuming very much of these days. It's also found in lesser amounts in some seafood and some grass-fed beef, but the most kind of abundant sources of choline in food form are eggs and liver.
Can I ask you, I want to go back to that statistic. You said 95% of the women in the US, I'm guessing, are not meeting their nutritional needs. They're nutrient depleted. If they were to take a test, 95% of them would fail on many fronts. Why is that?
So the underlying reasons for nutritional depletion, they're vast. There's many reasons behind it, but we talked a little bit about hormone, kind of synthetic hormones, and the role that has on the body. And that's true across many discrete time periods in a woman's life. Birth control, maybe in the earlier years. I know I personally was on hormonal birth control for over a decade, from about 18 to 28 or so, until shortly before, maybe even my early 30s, before I think I stopped hormonal birth control about a year before deciding to conceive. That's a long time period to be on synthetic hormones. And I don't remember anyone telling me that hey, you should be taking a multivitamin if you're on this, because there's good research showing that a lot of the critical vitamins and minerals can be depleted when you're on that birth control.
Do you know how many women are on birth control in the US?
I think when I last looked it up, there's different forms of birth control, but it's certainly over 30% of women are on oral contraceptives and other forms of birth control, some of them like an IUD. That is hormones, but it can be a little less direct, kind of directly into the bloodstream and there's certain IUDs that are like progesterone only. They don't do a combination of estrogen and progesterone. Same with oral contraceptives. Some are combination hormones, some of them are single, but it's a significant portion of the population. I don't know the stat off the top of my head of total kind of how many women at one point in their lifetime was on hormonal contraceptives, but my reasonable guess from just understanding our community at Needed and my own friends and family is well north of 50% of women take oral contraceptives or have an IUD at some portion of their life.
So birth control, being on birth control plays a role in being deficient in certain nutrients. What else contributes to that?
So other factors are exposure to environmental toxins. So at baseline, because of the number of toxins that we're exposed to, are basically our underlying metabolic needs, our micronutrient needs for the body to be able to naturally detoxify. Our bodies are pretty good at natural detox, but it requires nutrition to support that process. So that has raised our underlying micronutrient needs.
That means like plastics, heavy metals,
microplastics, heavy metals,
and stuff and chemicals in there.
Exactly.
So
and we have a very choosy consumer, rightfully so. Women are becoming more aware of the issue of heavy metals, and they're concerned about microplastics, and they want to know if our supplements are safe. And not only are we rigorously testing and qualifying ingredients across over 2,000 quality checkpoints, including testing for microplastics and heavy metals, but dosing optimally in our supplements actually can be supportive of the body's natural detox pathway. It's really good to look for high quality supplements because it can be a hidden source, like pea protein, for example. That can be a real challenge, or chocolate proteins if they're using cacao. A lot of them don't pass Prop 65, which is a state of California requirement. It's a labeling requirement that if you contain more parts per million of heavy metals like lead or cadmium or arsenic, you have to disclose that on your label or on your website. And protein powders are ubiquitous for not passing Prop 65, but there's also quite a few products on the market that probably ought to carry that warning that are marketing directly to women who are pregnant. And Prop 65 is all about disclosing those known risks that can be known to cause birth defects. So we take that very seriously at Needed, and we won't launch a product. We actually worked for quite a while on developing a greens powder, but couldn't get comfortable with it because we couldn't find a way. There was no basically source that we could guarantee wasn't going to be in violation of Prop 65, and we didn't want to have to offer a product. Actually, we know that some competitors in our category have been sued over Prop 65. They didn't have the warning out there and they needed it. So we take that really seriously, but I think something that people aren't as aware of is how much actually supporting your body nutritionally can help you day to day. There is no way to avoid it. Any food grown in soil, we are exposed to so much environmental toxins. I have 3 young kids. My oldest is going to be 6 this summer. My youngest is a little over 18 months. And there's some concerning research showing that by the time a child is not very old, I think it's 2 or 3 years old, that they have a credit card's worth of plastics in their brain. And I don't say that to fearmonger, but just to normalize the fact that even if you're being very intentional about avoiding these microplastics or pesticides or heavy metals. It's in our environment. And that's one of the reasons that we need to really focus on optimal nutrition and why some women are depleted. And then a third reason is soil quality. So our food can only be as nutrient dense as the soil that it's grown in, or that in the case of like animal proteins, how nutrient dense is the feed that these animals are being fed. That is why grass-fed, pasture-raised animals tend to be preferred. And there's a lot of greenwashing in our food system.
What's greenwashing?
Greenwashing is basically a concept of buzz terms that sound good, sound better, sound either more environmentally friendly or more healthy for human health or for animal health or for planetary health, but that underlying really aren't. An example being I think the requirements for considering something to be grass-fed or to be pasture-raised is pretty minimal. So you can be like fed some grass, but not entirely fed grass and still claim grass-fed. That's why some brands have now taken to calling their products grass finished, so grass fed and grass finished, because grain can help bulk up a cow a lot before slaughter. And that's a kind of cheating way to do it, is to give them some grass at some point in their life, but then to finish with a grain. And that greenwashing is pretty ubiquitous. But if an animal actually is fed on grass, they tend to be more nutrient replete than if they're fed a grain. And if you think about produce that we're consuming, fruits and vegetables, they depend on soil. They depend on healthy, micronutrient rich. That's where plants get their phytonutrients and micronutrients and minerals, is from the soil. So if our soil is depleted, and the reasons for that is industrial farming, we are growing a lot of one crop in the soil. We're not rotating crops. Some of us might remember that from early, maybe middle school history lessons on the beginning of agricultural society. There used to be a practice of rotating crops, because some crops add things back into the soil and then others take from the soil, and rotation can help to preserve healthy soil. But we, by and large, don't do that now. We're growing for a mass scale. We are growing a lot of the same crops. A lot of the crop that's being grown is corn, it's potatoes, it's rice. Those dominate the agricultural system much more so than the produce that you might to buy at a farmer's market, like lettuces and tomatoes and cucumbers and stone fruit. That's a small portion of the agricultural system. And then the last factor is, beyond soil quality, is how long food takes to reach us. So oftentimes it's picked weeks before you actually consume it, because there's a transit time. It has to come from the farm to a distributor to the grocery store, then you buy it. It might sit in your fridge for up to a week before you consume it. And going direct to farms through a farmer's market or a food co-op, if that is in your area, or growing your own food, can be a really good way to get food that is produce and other food that is more nutrient rich. But again, as I said at the beginning, Ryan and I were doing that. We were going to the farmer's market once a week and sourcing the grass-fed, pasture-raised, all of that, and we were still nutritionally depleted because of some of the other factors.
Super interesting. So yeah, we're going to say that the biggest drivers were the birth control, the toxins in the environment, which we can reduce that, but it's really, really hard. The soil quality. So even though you were buying organic or farmers market stuff, it was just not enough. And then the transport as well. And I imagine ultra processed foods, like you're probably eating, not you,
Absolutely.
but in general, many people are eating more of that and even less. So if you are lucky to even get some vegetables in your plate, it's not enough.
And that's such a great point, because I think those who are probably listening here and in your community are very focused on optimizing. And optimal would be like grow your own food, shop at the farmer's market, buy all these pasture raised, et cetera. But we also very much recognize, my early career in undergrad, I was an economics major studying food access, nutritional access. And there are so many places within the US where people lack access to healthy foods. They lack access to a grocery store. It's called food deserts, which some may have heard of, but they don't even have a grocery store within a reasonable distance of their home. Their closest food destination is a gas station or a corner store that has no produce. There's also the problem of financial access, that what we're talking about can be, shopping in a farmer's market can be a cost-effective way to get access to really high-quality food. But we all know in the US and I think globally, food prices have risen a lot. And so I think I would be remiss if I didn't mention the problem of financial access as well. It is sometimes cheaper to buy the convenience foods, the highly processed foods, to feed a big family. it can be more cost effective to go to a McDonald's than it is to prepare food at home. And that's a huge public health issue that we can't ignore. And even those who have supplemental nutrition assistance like food stamps, it is really hard to get by in the US. You and I were talking about that a little bit before. One of the benefits of living abroad being like a more affordable lifestyle. And we feel for women in the US who are just trying to get by. And it is such a luxury to be able to focus on optimizing your health amidst all of these huge public health issues that are so much bigger than any one person.
I'm glad you brought up the ultra processed foods and talked a little bit about that and the food deserts and the solution. I don't know how to do it, but when I'm in Thailand, there are these little trucks that go around the city or the town or wherever I'm at, and they're vegetables. They sell vegetables and fruit, and they're fresh and they're dirt cheap or affordable for the local people as well. So I'm thinking, gosh, if you're in a food desert, it'd be nice if somebody had a little truck and could go around to those places selling fresh fruit and vegetables in order to populate. That was just one thing.
Yeah, I love that idea.
I hope somebody does that one day.
It's such a multifactorial issue. It's a widespread issue. One of the passion projects that I care about is so even those who are on supplemental nutrition assistance, so through WIC, Women, Infant, Children program here in the US, or on SNAP, which is the food stamps, and SNAP don't cover prenatal vitamins. They don't. Their programs are designed only around food, not around supplements, and prenatal vitamins are excluded. So then women are hopefully choosing to take a prenatal because taking a prenatal is better than not taking a prenatal, but oftentimes they're taking what they can afford, which is going to be a product that is lacking in a lot of the most critical nutrients or using nutrient forms that our bodies can't best process. Far from optimal, but gosh, better than nothing. And so I think that's needed as a public benefit corporation, which basically, and we're also a B Corp. We have always had a mission of expanding nutritional access, expanding awareness. We do a lot of free education for women, and we're doing a lot, as much as we can, as much as any one company can do to make nutrition more affordable. So we donate products to women in need. We're also participating, which is really exciting, in a 500 pregnant person clinical study that's kicking off later this year. It's not yet been announced, but the intended focus of it is in a Medicaid population, giving women access to needed supplements, to a one-on-one nutritionist, access to nutritional biomarker and genetic testing, and basically tailoring a nutritional program to meet these women's needs. And the pilot program of this has been run for quite some time, shown that it lowers the rates of preterm birth and hypertension and gestational diabetes. I mean, the outcomes are incredible. This is a study that's being funded by a large health system and a state government, so it's incredible to see what the future can be. And we think that this type of research on women who need it most is what it's going to take to turn the tide and to eventually amass enough clinical proof that nutrition does change outcomes. Relatively speaking, it's such a low cost intervention to prevent serious health complications that are so expensive, like preterm birth and NICU stay. That's millions of dollars for these insurance providers. And instead to focus on and not blind to the fact that a needed supplement is something that not all women can afford. But when you talk about a $40 a month intervention to prevent $1 million health complication down the road that can have lifelong health impacts for mother and baby, it's just common sense, and something that I hope becomes the norm in 10, 20 years from now, that we have woken up as a population to how this world of optimizing your health, it's expensive, it's an investment, but there's nothing more important than our health. And nutrition and these lifestyle modifications that you talk about so often on this podcast are such a lower cost way to do it than to wait until we have a major disease issue.
It's an investment in your health, and it's better to pay now for an intervention, a protocol, a supplement, good nutrition, organic food, than the price that you're going to pay for all the treatments of illness later on. So I think
and on that note, I think one thing that I think women who are in perimenopause or menopause should be aware of is hormone replacement therapy has become much more common. It was out of favor. It's come much more back in favor, especially a focus on bioidentical hormone replacement. And that can be such a powerful tool for women to feel symptom alleviation. But it is really important to first address nutritional deficiencies before starting on an intervention like HRT. With underlying nutritional deficiencies, adding those synthetic hormones to your system can actually have unintended complications. It can exacerbate symptoms rather than alleviating them. And nutrition is much more affordable than HRT is. So to the further point of starting with the nutritional foundation, if we had a billboard, that's the marquee message, is start with the fundamentals. It's not the sexy stuff. Taking a multivitamin isn't as interesting as taking like a hot flash support or sleep support, these symptom-specific alleviations, but it really is the foundation. And one of the practitioners that we work with closely at Needed uses this analogy that I love of micronutrients are like letters in the alphabet. You can't spell all the words in the English language without the letter E or the letter A. And the same is true in our body. If you're missing a key nutrient, your body can't perform optimally. So I guess it's our mission at Needed to make nutritional repletion part of the zeitgeist, part of the culture, and a cool thing to do rather than the boring basics that we tend to think of like a multivitamin being.
I'm glad you're talking so much about nutrition. This is why I do want to talk about this. I don't know if you follow Laura Lamb, but she's a menopause expert, and she's she's not anti-hormones, but nutrition is her jam. And I'm part of our community, and I see how many people are alleviating their hot flashes, the weight gain, the brain fog, the poor sleep, just with food and just with nutrition. And so, yes, you can. This has a big impact. It's the easy thing is just get on the hormones. And I always say you can't out hormone a bad diet and lifestyle. And as pro-hormone as I am.
Same with supplements, though, frankly. It's like you can't out-supplement a bad diet. It's not meant to be a replacement for the other factors. But yeah, absolutely. Like nutrition has the power to change women's health outcomes and how we feel. And it starts with awareness, though, you know?
It's really hard, though, to change diet. And I think it's much easier to take a supplement or much easier to just put some cream on your arms. But we also, I think, we need to be aware our body needs to detox hormones as well as any other thing that the body needs to detox. And having good liver function is key. It's just for longevity in general. But that's why it's nice to take these hormones to support. And I like women to at least do this all together if they can't get it sorted out before. But it is really hard to ask a woman to start cooking well and eating the right vegetables and go to the gym, and when you're not sleeping well because of a hot flash, when you're not. So sometimes each person has to approach it the way they need to approach it. But I really just don't want people to forget that piece, how important nutrition is. And it does, and not only for hot flashes or menopause, but for cancers and any diseases, diabetes and metabolic disease. It's the one thing that how many people have gone on diets and failed, and their weight goes up and down, and now we have the GLP-1s and Ozempics and all these things. And I'm not sure, it'd be interesting, I don't know if you have any information, the people who are taking the weight loss peptides, are they becoming nutrient depleted because they are not eating? I mean, that's part of it's an appetite suppressant in many ways. So they were probably already nutrient depleted, maybe because of, I don't know, other issues, but now probably even more so. What do you think?
Yeah, it's an issue with any calorie restriction. It is a phenomenon, back to the point on processed foods. It's wild that we both have obesity and morbid obesity in this country, a huge excess of caloric intake relative to metabolic output, and also a huge micronutrient deficiency in the general population. And a lot of that comes from the excess of processed foods, but then also the caloric restriction that comes with weight loss can exacerbate micronutrient deficiencies. And we do see this I think it is a smart decision if you're investing in the cost of a GLP-1 to also be focused on supplementation to close your nutritional gaps, because it absolutely can. I think we are talking about, or as a society, people are talking about the need for fiber. There are supplements on the market that are marketing themselves as a GLP-1 alternative, so naturally supporting GLP-1s, but there's not nearly enough focus on how do you be the nutritional support surrounding GLP-1s, because the usage of it is growing significantly, and the largest number of GLP-1 users are women over the age of 40. So it is something that it's really imperative for women's health that we raise awareness for the fact that caloric restriction in any form, but certainly through GLP-1 usage, can contribute to nutritional deficiency, and it's a problem. And women's bone health matters so much as we age, and those who are taking GLP-1s, they're at known risk for muscle mass decline in a pretty rapid way, and muscle is so important for bone health, and making sure that you're supporting muscle mass with protein, and we have a forthcoming creatine product that can be a great solution or addition to a women's diet when she's on a GLP-1. It's just really important. And again, an area where we often turn to, and I'm not knocking women for taking GLP-1s, same as we would never criticize a woman for taking hormonal birth control. They can be great tools, but the problem is that there is a lack of informed consent being given about the nutritional complications that can arise from doing so.
One thing I would add to, perhaps you're the professional here and more than me, is in terms of deficiency, is the menopause gut. Yeah. Evidently, I have a lot of women in my community who have gut issues. Mm-hmm. And if you're not able to if the gut is not functioning properly, how do you absorb the nutrients from the food or the supplement? So that is a possible driver as well in terms of low nutrient, having high nutrient deficiency or low nutrient status in the body.
Yeah. I think a lot of people aren't aware of how closely linked the gut is to hormone production as well. We see this in fertility as well as in midlife, that the gut it's critical to, the microbiome is critical for hormone production and synthesis. So healthy hormone levels do trace back to gut health, and making that a priority. There's simple food ways of supporting the gut: eating fermented foods, eating a diversity of plants, eating lots of seeds and fiber, but also taking a women's specific probiotic can be very beneficial. A lot of women, as they age, the vaginal microbiome also changes, and there are strains. We have a women's pre and probiotic that was initially designed for pregnancy, but a lot of the strains in it support the vaginal microbiome because that's critical in pregnancy. The baby's microbiome is seeded through birth, through vaginal birth. And there's also now some research showing that the uterus is not a sterile environment, so the baby gets some exposure to the maternal microbiome in utero as well. But for women who are in midlife, as the vaginal microbiome changes with hormone changes, we can tend to have some complications, whether it's vaginal dryness or UTIs increasing as the microbiome changes. And that all really starts with gut health. The microbiome in your gut is connected to so many different processes in the body. So I'm so glad you brought that up, because it is absolutely such an important thing to focus on in midlife.
I want to know what testing we can do to see, because I generally like to test, measure, and assess. Am I nutrient deficient, and do I need more vitamin D or not? And is the supplement I'm taking working? So it's so simple to get a vitamin D test, but there's a whole lot of micronutrients and vitamins and minerals that need to be looked at. So how do you recommend testing to see what you're deficient in?
Yeah, when Ryan and I first tested our nutrient levels about 10 years ago, it was through an at-home nutrient test, so the finger prick tests. Those are available. There are also some other direct-to-consumer testing options like Function Health. I don't know if they're international, but in the US, Function Health is like a membership-based program where you get access to a bunch of tests, including micronutrient testing twice a year. There's also a pretty detailed hormone panel. You can test cortisol levels, et cetera, through Function Health. If you have a practitioner that is willing to order more detailed micronutrient testing, that is amazing. We've found often that that is not the case. Oftentimes we'll hear from needed customers that their OB would order vitamin D and iron, but not any more detailed micronutrient testing. But naturopathic doctors, registered dietitians, functional medicine doctors are much more, and midwives as well, are much more likely to order more detailed micronutrient panels. So that's another option. And then I think there is also a direct-to-consumer option through LabCorp and Quest. It's just more expensive than if your doctor orders it. Personally, I would start with your doctor. If you run into any roadblocks, I would check out options like Function Health. I believe it's around I think it might even be priced at $360 to mirror the 365 days in a year. But that is a pretty comprehensive, maybe not quite as comprehensive as working with a functional medicine doctor, but can actually be pretty cost effective because they also help with interpretation of the results. So that is not affiliated at all. It's just a company that we're aware of that makes access to that testing more ubiquitous.
I'm wondering what would you recommend testing if somebody had, I guess you can go to a lab or your doctor can give you some labs and say, okay, take these, which is fine. But if somebody's trying to do it on their own or get an idea, the list can be long, couldn't it?
It can be long.
Or they're just key ones that really reflect the status of everything else. What do you think we should do?
So there's a couple of nutrients. They're not standard, but omega-3 being one of them. That there's a company called Omega Quant that offers direct-to-consumer omega-3 testing. Mm-hmm. I would honestly say that the vast majority, we at one point sold vitamin D and omega-3 tests via our website. What we found is that the vast majority of women are depleted in both of those nutrients, and many chose not to test and just took it on good authority that, okay, I'm probably in the 95%, I should probably be supplementing. But it can be helpful to test those nutrients like omega-3 and vitamin D to know how to titrate your dosing. If you're very deficient, you might want to take even more than what we would typically recommend for an average healthy woman. B12 is another nutrient that I would suggest. That's really quite easy to test on any standard Quest LabCorp test. B12 is a little bit of a tricky one to assess, though, through blood work. And my functional practitioner has me stop taking B12 for about a week or at least a couple of days before lab testing because the B12 biomarkers can show as high. It's basically just a read of if you are in the normal range, it might just be a sign that you're taking any supplemental B12. So it can be a little bit of like a missed signal of depletion with B12. So there are some other biomarkers that people will test to determine if you're actually in a state of repletion or not, like homocysteine and methylmalonic acid are two biomarkers that functional doctors might test to see actually how usable is the B12 at high levels.
You said homocysteine. What was the second one?
Yes, homocysteine and then methylmalonic acid, MMA. So high levels of both of those markers can indicate a deficiency of B12, and that can be more reliable than just taking a straight serum B12 measure. It can appear falsely normal even when you're deficient. And it's like testing's come a long way, but there are still some imperfections. Choline is another nutrient that's a little bit difficult to assess through blood serum levels. You can appear to be fine on choline when you're really not. So for choline, I would suggest assuming that you might be deficient and prioritizing eggs in your diet, prioritizing taking a supplement that has at least 100 milligrams of choline in it a day to make a difference. We've seen a lot of the women's multis and perimenopause multis on the market have like 20. If they have any choline at all, they have like 20 to 50 milligrams of choline. And that's just like such a small amount. It's less than what you get in one egg. It's almost not doing anything for you. So that's a good one to just assume you might need to supplement for. Okay. And then you can test magnesium. You can test the magnesium content in red blood cell count. There are a lot of the nutrients, B6, all the B vitamins are pretty readily testable.
Is it worth testing your A, C, E?
I think my functional practitioner more often will, rather than testing vitamin C levels, they'll test like a CBC. So what does your blood cell count look like? And I'm someone who tends towards low white blood cell count. I need a higher amount of vitamin C than the average person to be in a normal range. That can be common in those. I have Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune condition impacting thyroid function. It's well managed in my case, but that can be common. It's not an indication that I have cancer, which can be a concern with white blood cell count or another serious issue like that. But for me, it's just kind of like a thing that I know that I need to manage with a higher amount of vitamin C. But I think this conversation around the nuance of it is why it can be really helpful to work with a functional practitioner or use a platform like Function Health that helps with the readout. The worst case scenario would be that you end up with these results and you go to ChatGPT and you type it in and maybe it indicates, oh no, you have a bigger issue than you do, or maybe, hey, this is normal, and maybe it's not normal. If your B12 looks like it's normal, but your homocysteine or your MMA are not normal, it can be really helpful to work with someone to help guide you through that.
Yeah, I think that's probably a really good advice because you can get so lost and wrapped into this and trying to do it on your own. And this is why we have people like you and people in our community as well, working with the women. And so the approach I generally have been taking myself is, what am I deficient in, and like fill it. And I used to take a multivitamin because I was like, I don't know. And I like the convenience of that. Like, I just get everything in just a capsules or one a day or whatever it is that was on the market at the time. But now I'm getting a little pill fatigue. I don't know, can I just compact everything in one? And this is one of the reasons I really wanted to talk to you, because you do have a multivitamin.
Yep.
And I want to know how. So when you first of all, there's two questions. When you formulated this, you have a formulation called Perimulti.
Yes.
And that's for women going through perimenopause.
Exactly.
So,
yep.
So the one, and you also have a women's health multivitamin. So
Yep.
what's the difference? Like, do women need different nutrition in perimenopause than they do in premenopause?
Yeah, so it's such a great question. The honest answer is that in the US, so we talked a little bit at the beginning about the RDAs for pregnancy. There is an RDA for pregnant women and breastfeeding women. There is an RDA for women 19 to 50. So that's quite a wide range. So basically non-pregnant women 19 to 50. And then there is an RDA for women 50 plus. There is no RDA for perimenopause. There is no RDA for women who are on hormonal birth control. There is no RDA for women who have had a baby but aren't yet in perimenopause. And the reason for that is, like, fundamentally, there isn't enough research on these distinct stages of women's health to underpin a specific recommendation. But what we do know from the clinical literature and from in-practice experience is that there are some nutrients that are needed in higher amounts in perimenopause than at other stages of women's health, nutrients like choline being one of them. And importantly, because there is no RDA for those specific stages of women's life, women aren't being recommended to take anything. The fact that women, broadly speaking, are being recommended to take a prenatal vitamin is because there is an RDA specific to that. It's become part of the general medical advice. And generally speaking, and you and your audience can probably attest to this through personal experience, it is very rare to be recommended by a medical doctor to take a perimenopausal vitamin. So we created our perimenopause multi to really speak directly to women's needs in that stage of life, and to be able to ensure that women, generally speaking, want to take products. We've learned this throughout the last decade or so at Needed. They want to take products that they know are formulated for them and for their specific stage of women's health. And the perimenopause is a great example of that. We've had a women's multi for a few years, but it was not specifically speaking to women in the perimenopause stage of life. And your needs are different, very different than a 19-year-old woman or a woman who's in her mid-30s, not yet experiencing perimenopause. On the note of pill fatigue, though, we do have, in a couple of weeks, in early to mid-May, we have a powder version of our perimenopause multi-launching, and also a powder version of the women's multi-launching that we're really excited about, because pill fatigue is real. And this product is so amazing. It's something that is easy to mix into. You can mix it into any milk. You can mix it into water if you wanted to. I like it best kind of mixed into milk or mixed into a smoothie. If you're a coffee drinker, you can take it with your coffee. You can mix it into oatmeal. Vanilla. It's vanilla flavored, but pretty mild. It really does not taste like a vitamin. Our R&D team really nailed this product.
Is it sweetened with something? Like what
It's
other?
sweetened with monk fruit, not with stevia. And we don't use monk fruit that's cut with. A lot of people who have any GI impact of taking monk fruit, it's because a lot of the monk fruit on the market is cut with a sugar alcohol called erythritol, and ours is not. We use pure 100% pure monk fruit. So it's really well tolerated, and it's not too sweet. That's another thing that really bothers me about a lot of the fake sugar products on the market it's like cloyingly sweet. You can taste the stevia, or you can taste the monk fruit, and I think we've really nailed this one. It's also great with our collagen protein, which to me, I like taking them together because, one, to support amino acid needs, and our collagen has every amino acid that's needed for protein synthesis other than tryptophan. But if you pair it with milk or nut milk or anything else that you're consuming as part of your day, it's a good source of meeting your overall protein needs. And I think
sorry to interrupt, I thought collagen, like a collagen powder, you can't really count that towards your protein needs. Like if you're trying to hit 30 and collagen has 10, it doesn't equal. Is that true?
So there are specific labeling requirements around collagen, because most collagen doesn't have tryptophan unless it's added to it. A lot of people often think of turkey when I think of tryptophan. It's it's an amino acid that is rich in turkey and poultry. And it's like Thanksgiving sleepy amino acid that people often think of. You need a nap after your Thanksgiving dinner. But tryptophan is found in a lot of other foods that are commonly eaten throughout the day. And
cashews, no?
Yeah, I think there is tryptophan in nuts, and then also in dairy. And so it's kind of like, you've heard of food combining. Traditional cultures would eat rice and beans together. It's because together it can make a complete protein, and the same concept is true for collagen. So no, we wouldn't say collagen is your sole source of protein. It's not technically a complete protein because it's missing tryptophan, but it can help you meet your overall dietary needs when it's paired with other foods that have tryptophan in it.
Why do
and our body is good at recombining those amino acids, so it still supports the overall amino acid needs of your body. Yeah. It's really rich in two amino acids in particular, glycine and proline, that are in some stages of women's health like pregnancy conditionally essential, meaning you can only consume them through diet. Your body can't synthesize them on their own. So it's an incredible dietary source of amino acids.
Why do women need more choline in perimenopause?
Really because as estrogen declines, the need increases. So estrogen, the actual kind of process by which this happens is a little bit complicated, but basically the simplest way to think about it is that higher estrogen helps with synthesis of choline. And then as estrogen declines, the need for basically exogenous choline, so consuming choline through diet, goes up. I am not totally clear on why estrogen promotes the production of choline in the body. One thing that is interesting to me is thinking through, like, knowing how critical choline is to pregnancy. If that's like a smart adaptation our bodies have had over time of, like, when your estrogen is higher, it's the time period for women post-puberty and pre-menopause, and that's the time that you're fertile and your body needs a lot of choline to support a baby's health and well-being. I'm not sure if researchers fully understand the why, but estrogen does promote choline production. And so for women who have declining estrogen, it becomes that much more important to consume choline through our diets.
As I was looking at your supplement, the Multi, I was really impressed. So one, I said, okay, let's talk a little bit more about needed. I see that you're going beyond the normal standards of making a multivitamin. And as I'm looking at the label, I noticed that most of the percentage of recommended daily allowance is over 100%. Some of them are up to 4,000%. Yeah. And I was impressed because you also had a vitamin D that was 4,000 IUs. Yeah. And that's really rare to see in a multivitamin. Yeah. So I'm thinking, and you also had high levels of B vitamins, and I'm guessing because women, and I don't know, it'd be interesting to know are these levels different? They're higher in perimenopause supplement versus premenopause, or are these ingredients different?
So these dosages are different than we would, perimenopause is kind of the second most nutritionally demanding time in a woman's life after pregnancy. So we do dose differently for many nutrients in this time period than we would for pregnancy, but some nutrients we don't, like vitamin D. We dose the same in pregnancy as we do in perimenopause because that's the amount that our practitioners experience. And we haven't spent a lot of time talking about practitioners, but needed was started really off of that initial personal experience and insight that women are nutritionally depleted at some of the most critical times in their lives. And we validated that need from an early stage, really almost from day one, with women's health practitioners that serve women across their health span and who test women's nutrient and hormone levels day in and day out. And we built trust with those practitioners. And through that trust, they shared with us what they were seeing in their clinical practice. And what practitioners were seeing in clinical practice was that women needed a higher amount of vitamin D, significantly higher than the percent daily value is what you see on a supplement facts panel. It's going to be it's basically a similar concept as the RDA. The two are interrelated to one another. They're not totally synonymous, but an interconnected concept, and that the RDA is just far too low for a nutrient like vitamin D. It needs to be significantly higher. So that's why we're dosing at 4,000 IUs, which is 500% of the daily value and again, the daily value here is for women 19 to 50. So it's a general population, not specific to perimenopause. And that is why we're dosing so much higher, is because fundamentally the RDAs are based on bare minimums, not what's optimal, and they don't take into account population-specific research. They don't take into account enough population-specific research for women who are in a time period like perimenopause. So we rely heavily on in-practice experience of our practitioners and the available research that we do know, like for a nutrient like choline. Vitamin D is critical for hormone production, and it's also critical for bone health. It works synergistically with calcium to support bone health. So that's why women in perimenopause need a really healthy amount.
Yeah, this formulation is super interesting. And like I said, I'm getting pill fatigue. And what I'm seeing is that, I can drop my vitamin D. I can drop my niacin, I can drop my zinc, I can drop my, not the magnesium, because you don't have as much magnesium in here as recommended and I generally take.
Yeah.
But so
and that is really because in the case of magnesium, that is because we design all of our products to work together in a system. So we have magnesium in two other products that are really popular at Needed. One is our sleep support, which has a healthy amount of magnesium, and then also a clinically relevant dosage of glycine, which is really supportive for sleep and relaxation. And then we also include magnesium in our hydration support. It's a good source of electrolytes, really popular for women across different stages of women's health. So we're always designing our products in a way that they can work together, that you can safely stack them together, and that's pretty rare. Many of the products on the market have, a good example of this is like a symptom-specific product. So there's a lot of them on the market. Ones that easily come to mind for me are like a hot flash support. Some of those products on the market have like herbs in it. They might have some other ingredients that confer a benefit, but then they're also going to have a small amount, but not a meaningful amount of micronutrients. So it's not enough to be your multivitamin. It's just simply not. But then if you stack it on top of a multivitamin, it might not be safe to take in addition to a multi. And so at Needed, we really design in a system, and we're dosing in a way that is therapeutic, that confers a therapeutic benefit. But agreed that in the case of magnesium, many women would benefit from taking more than what's in our peri-multi, but it is a significantly higher amount of magnesium than you'd find in a typical women's multi. The market for perimenopause multis is still really new. It's very early. There's not a lot on the market. But if you compare this product to a standard women's multi, the magnesium dose is significantly higher. I think it's upwards of 4 times higher than you'd see in a typical women's multi.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. And you've got other B6 and B12. B12 is like 4,000%.
Yeah.
And so I'm already counting here. I could drop like 6 bottles, at least maybe 7 of what I'm taking. And you take only 2 capsules a day? Is that?
Yes. And that's another reason that the magnesium's dosed where it is, because we really wanted this to be a product that women could fit into their routine easily. That's also why we have a powder coming out to really fit into your routine smoothly. And because our philosophy, as I was speaking to earlier about the system of products, is that for most women, like the micronutrients in a multivitamin is fundamental, it's critical, it's core to what they need. But a lot of times nutrition is broader than just micronutrients alone. And there are some really amazing products like our stress support and our cognitive support and our omega-3 that can complement a woman's routine, and that adds more capsules. So we try to formulate in a way that thinks about the whole routine as a system. And it was important to us to get the peri down to 2 capsules. Magnesium, especially when it's in a glycinated form, is a bulky nutrient, takes up a lot of space. It's a nutrient that can be hard to fit into 2 capsules without crowding out some of those other really important things like choline and the B vitamins.
Amazing. Yeah. It's really interesting. And the capsule is vegetable capsule, and you don't have any fillers, which again is hard enough to get all these nutrients into just 2 capsules. It's amazing that you did it, but now I understand how you did it. Yeah. And do you have a bone formula?
We don't have a specific product for bone health, but we do formulate our perimenopause multi with bone health in mind. We included a lot of the nutritional cofactors that are very helpful for bone health, and that together with calcium that you can consume from your diet can be really supportive of bone health. So nutrients like vitamin D, that 4,000 IUs of vitamin D is really important for supporting bone health, and it can work synergistically with calcium. K2 is another nutrient that is great to be paired with vitamin D. You often will find it in a dropper product as vitamin D3 K2. We actually also have a separate vitamin D3 K2 product that's a standalone that is also really supportive for meeting your vitamin D levels if for some reason the 2 capsule perimenopause multi isn't for you.
Or you need to add. Sometimes people, when they test, even 4,000 is not enough, so they got to take more. So it's maybe an add-on as well.
Exactly. And actually, in the time period of pregnancy, there's research showing that upwards of 6,000 IUs is what it takes to give baby enough vitamin D for their own needs once they're born. And so that vitamin D is stackable. It's something that women will take on top of their prenatal, or you could take it on top of one of our multis as well.
Okay, I'm not perimenopausal anymore. I'm post. Can I still take it?
You can, yeah. So one of the nutrients that is commonly found in a women's multi that makes it inappropriate for postmenopausal women is iron. So iron needs increase substantially in pregnancy. Many women need supplemental iron. Iron needs can also be high in perimenopause if you're still cycling, and some women actually find that their menstrual bleeding increases during perimenopause before the periods stop. We do have a supplemental iron. It's a really gentle and bioavailable form, iron bisglycinate, that's offered separately. But we don't include it in our women's multi, and we don't include it in our perimenopause multi, and we don't include it in our prenatal multi because iron outcompetes other minerals for absorption, and iron needs vary. So if you put it in a multivitamin, it can outcompete some of the other minerals that are really critical and that you need. And then needs are very specific. Some women have very low ferritin. They run really low on iron and they need supplemental iron while other women don't. And actually taking too much iron can interfere with the gut microbiome. So for a woman who is postmenopausal, you likely do not need supplemental iron unless you have an underlying condition like anemia that is uncorrelated to your menstrual cycle. So yes, the perimenopause multi is a great product for women to take who are postmenopausal. It has that good amount of choline that many postmenopausal women who are no longer producing high levels of estrogen will benefit from. The vitamin D can be very supportive for women who are postmenopause as well.
Okay, I have to let you go because I have so many questions, but I have one question that when I was looking into your Instagram, on the bio it says fertility through menopause. Why is this so important?
Really, the reason is that we view that women's health is a continuum. And as we started the podcast talking about, most women's nutritional depletion in menopause traces back to their early onset of their fertility journey. So many women start off their 20s already nutritionally depleted, and that continues through all of the other stages of their reproductive journey, of their health journey. And we are really focused on women's health throughout what we call the entire mother span. Almost 90% of women will become mothers within their lifetime. And that depletion continuum it really exists on a continuum. And the research is aligning with this, that your health at an earlier stage dictates your health as you age. And nutrition and fixing nutritional depletion is a critical women's health issue. Whether you are in your 20s and thinking about having kids someday, or actively pregnant, or postpartum, or a mom with young kids, or in perimenopause or postmenopausal, this is a problem that impacts all of us.
Yeah, it's such an interesting, I really found that interesting because I thought, well, maybe there are plenty of women who want to get pregnant and they're in perimenopause.
That's true also.
40s,
that is true also.
They need that support. And then there's also, I thought maybe it's because of trying to preserve ovarian function as long as possible. We know that's healthy aging. And there's so many reasons. I just thought, oh, this is interesting quote.
Yeah, we've started consumer testing that messaging around your ovaries matter for more than reproduction. And I think it's still a little hard for women to wrap their head around that concept, but absolutely, we make an awesome egg quality support product, and your ovarian health is critical to hormone production. Women's progesterone rising in the second half of their cycle, if they are menstruating, comes from the egg. It comes from ovarian production, and it's a wild but beautiful new area of research, and something that we were not taught. I mean, I was not taught that in health class in middle school, of how critical all of this is to lifelong health. And we hope the times are changing and women are, increasingly seeking out education and podcasts like yours to better understand our own bodies and the interconnectedness of all of this.
Well, I'm so glad I found you, and I'm excited to try these and get rid of my other ones. And actually, I mentioned to you earlier, when I received my order, I shared on a little story on Instagram, and I got feedback saying, I love this brand and I use it, or I recommend it. And that was really good to hear because this is quite new for me, but I love what you're doing. I love your approach as a nutritionist to creating this. And we didn't even talk about the clinical trials, the safety profile, which I always look into before I talk about supplements on this podcast. But I'm impressed with what you're doing, and I hope to get really good feedback. If anybody wants to try them with me, you can go to thisisneeded.com and use the code ZORA, ZORA, for 20% off your first order. And I'll have a link to that as well in the show notes, as well as to the Instagram. And you'll get some great information there too. And you've got loads of practitioners, obviously, following you and using your product. So thank you so much, Julie, for your time. Is there anything else that you'd like to share before I let you go?
I think you covered a lot of it, but maybe just a quick note on that clinical profile. We are investing in clinical health research focused on women's needs. We talked a lot about the research gaps that exist and the research that is there but hasn't made it yet into the national nutrition standards for women. That is something that we are investing a lot of time and attention into, both proving through clinical research that nutrition changes outcomes for women, and then doing the work. It's going to be a long road ahead of us, but doing the work to synthesize what's out there, all the research and the compelling reasons why we need to update these national nutrition standards. We are in our own category in terms of the way that we dose for optimal nutrition, but we shouldn't be. This should be the law of the land or the norm in women's vitamins, and it's not. There's no standardization to what's in a prenatal vitamin or what's in a women's multivitamin, and it's time that changed. So thank you so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure. I always love sharing the education. I think so much of it is about when we're educated, when we're more aware, we can make different choices. And so it's always a pleasure to be able to share more about our story.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Yeah, I've learned so much from you as well. And hopefully everyone who's gotten to the end of this podcast has learned as well. I'm sure there's loads of golden nuggets here. Thank you for listening to the end. We wouldn't be here without you. So thank you again, Julie, for your time. And I can't wait to keep the conversation going. Take care.
Thank you.